All rise. District 10 of the Superior Court for the State of California for the County of San Francisco is now in session. The Honorable S. Lee Vavur is presiding. Be seated.
Wednesday, March 9th, 1977. Good morning, Council. Ladies and gentlemen, we're calling today the case of Barbara Lael Underwood, number 217039. Your name for the record, Counsel?
Your Honor, I'm Fran Curtis, and in regard to the matter of Barbara Lael Underwood, I represent the petitioning parents.
All right, thank you. Name of the counsel for the record.
Attorney Richard Soroy, and I represent the proposed conservatee.
All right. Proceed.
Our goal here, of course, is to obtain temporary conservatorship of this young adult for a period of 30 days. Barbara Underwood is in the courtroom today, sitting across from her mother. Our contention, our allegation, and our proof will demonstrate that this young adult has been the victim of artful and designing persons. That is to say specifically of the New Educational Development, which is a front organization for the Unification Church. The factors which will be demonstrated throughout this proceeding are that the following items have been utilized on this individual at one time or another during her programming: food deprivation, sleep deprivation, isolation, the use of guilt feelings, the use of fear tactics, and indoctrination. The same tactics used on our prisoners of war during the Korean War crisis. As a loose definition of what these items constitute, it is often referred to as coercive conversion or thought reform, or commonly referred to as brainwashing. The facts we will prove are that this young adult is victim of artful and designing persons. She has been both mentally and financially raped, as evidence will dictate.
Your Honor, I'll object to that. The use of the term is very inflammatory.
All right. Let's not use terminology of that nature, please.
So basically, that's what our evidence will show is the problem. In terms of the solution, our evidence, specifically through our medical personnel, indicates that the solution to this problem lies in reality-inducing therapy, which would consist of adequate food, sleep, books to read on coercive persuasion, and the opportunity to speak with former cult members. There is no law against brainwashing, and that's why we have turned to this court. And as our evidence will show, even her initial recruitment was through deceit. Thank you.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
Surely. Proceed, Mr. Soroy.
I believe the basic issue here is whether this young lady is competent. Secondly, there is another basic issue, and that is whether this young lady, whether her particular right for choosing her own philosophy of life or religion has been violated. I believe the evidence will show she freely gained membership of this organization, that she can leave any time she wants. Miss Curtis has stated that we have indulged in Korean-type brainwashing here. I believe the evidence will show, if Your Honor please, this gentleman here, through the so-called Freedom of Thought Foundation and their deprogramming processes, is the real brainwasher here. We can use that term properly. Where they incarcerate against their will. Now, I believe the evidence, as it finally comes forth, will show that this young lady knew what she did, that she is bright, that she is intelligent, and there's been absolutely no reason whatsoever that she should be declared incompetent or have a temporary or permanent conservatorship on her. She is an adult, over 21 years of age.
We went underground for God. When the church learned that our parents had filed for conservatorship orders, they secreted us away from the jurisdiction so that the papers could not be served. So we stayed on the road selling flowers for Father, while the agents of Satan ate their hearts out in San Francisco armed with useless court orders. We were so harassed by the policy of using state probate codes to legally kidnap and deprogram our members that we decided to strike Satan a blow by making a test case of it. I was in New Mexico with my flower selling team, and they flew me back to San Francisco. Mine was one of 5 conservatorships grouped into one single hearing, which later came to be known as the Trial of the Faithful 5.
6 arguments regarding thought control. Part 1, brainwashing. The provision of the California Probate Code, which parents evoked, reads as follows. Upon petition, the Superior Court, if satisfied by sufficiency of evidence, shall appoint a conservator of the person or property of any adult person, who is unable properly to care for himself or for his property, or is likely to be deceived by artful or designing persons, the court, in its discretion, may appoint one or more conservators.
This witness was the principal brainwasher in the Unification Church. He's brainwashed over 2,000 or 3,000 persons. He was an expert on it. He also instructed on it. He knows the specific techniques they used, and he's going to testify how he did it and what would happen if they tried to leave.
I just want to do a sociological study of the Oakland Unified Family. They're a utopian community with an enormous amount of power and dedication to them, and I want a chance to see how they work. That's all. Mom, of course I'll have to remain objective to be a good sociologist. But what I would really like to do is take a quarter off from school so I can involve myself and do a penetrating study. Well, I'll live with them for a while and take part in their practices. Of course I'll be careful.
Please state your name and address.
Gary Sharp, SCHARFF, Tucson, Arizona.
Do you have an address in Tucson?
Yes, I do. 5120 Sweetwater Drive, Tucson, Arizona.
Okay.
Mr. Sharp, what is your educational background?
I'm a 1974 cum laude graduate in religion from Princeton University.
Are you familiar with the group known as the Unification Church?
Yes, I am.
How is it you're familiar with them?
I was a member of the Unification Church from the summer of 1972 until May of 1976.
Living here is more of a challenge than I expected. Sleeping in a room with several sisters, sharing clothes from a common pool, cooking meals in the kitchen for the whole family. I have so much selfishness to overcome. My ego is constantly scraping up against harsh lessons. I know the family feels it is selfish of me to want to be alone to meditate and write, because there's so much more important work to be done.
What were your duties and responsibilities while you were in the Unification Church?
I was director of church operations for the state of Pennsylvania in 1973, a lecturer of the staff of Barrytown 1974 to 1975, a teaching assistant and student at the Unification Church Seminary in 1975, during which time I was personally responsible for recruiting new faculty for the seminary, teaching them some of the ideas of the movement. In 1976, I was an editor of a propaganda magazine known as New World.
Do you feel that you were one of the top leaders in the United States of the Unification Church?
Yes. I believe on the East Coast, I was among the hierarchy there.
I begin to understand everyone's contempt for my writing in books. Divine principle is so comprehensive, and its wisdom runs so deep, that they may be right when they say it's the only book I need to read. I still have trouble with the parts that seem objectionable to me, though. My ego gets in the way. But I fail to see this as my inability to comprehend a greater wisdom. My small mind takes exception to the subjugation of women. But if this is really the revealed truth, then it's my mind that's at error. All this talk about the satanic scares me, though.
Are you a member of the Unification Church now?
No, I am not.
Why is that?
Well, through examination of facts regarding corruption in the Unification Church, techniques of mental subjugation...
Mr. Sharp, I'd like to know the specific reasons.
Through a court action similar to this.
Mr. Sharp, I'd like to know your personal opinion as to whether you feel your thoughts were controlled while you were in the group.
Yes, I believe that they were. My concept of the community was that it was a group of very idealistic people who were working very hard to build the physical kingdom of God. And it really resonated to my own religion and moral values. And as I became more involved in the group, I came into an emotional environment in which my own thoughts, my own opinions about life were of very little importance. I had to submit myself to certain pressures, and most of these I wasn't even aware of.
of course my writing is not acceptable to the church. It's an expression of the ego, done for the gratification it will bring to the self. From now on, I will make my writing into worship. I will dedicate myself to chronicling the coming of the kingdom and the lives of my Father's faithful followers, so that these days can be remembered for the darkness and error that now infect the earth, and the coming of the light.
What are the pressures and techniques used by the Unification Church?
Okay. There is first a very strong isolation of the individual, from his home, from his friends, and in certain respects even from his own mind. When I was in the Barrytown Workshop program, I instructed my staff to provide transportation for the people. So when they got there, they were virtually trapped. They had no transportation back to New York City, 100 miles away. And there was only one phone in the area, and they weren't permitted to use that. They weren't permitted to leave the property. There were guards on the property. People were very, very strongly pressured.
I feel just this incredible desire to understand more of these principles. Principles that deal with law in the universe. Relationship of man to God or a higher deity. Relationship of man to the natural world around us. And also, there's a tremendous amount of love and respect for one another. A unity among people I've never experienced before. A desire to cooperate and share and enhance each other's lives. But, no, I can't come home right now.
The program was completely structured. From 7 in the morning until 12:30 or 1 a.m., every single activity a person engaged in was done by a group. A person had no free time whatsoever. And that included exercising, washing, eating, going to lectures, participating in sports. And it was a very intense schedule. So a person was so fatigued by the end of the day, they would virtually collapse in their bed, and they really didn't have time to think about their day's experience. Meanwhile, they are deluged with an enormous array of concepts. The nature of God, the origin of evil, the mission of Jesus, the purpose of the coming of Jesus, the nature of Jesus. An enormous array that would take any reasonable person 30 to 40 days to figure out.
When we think we are free, we fail to recognize we are slaves to ego. True freedom means being a slave to God.
Next, we would put them into a situation where they had limited sleep and food. People would get very sluggish during the training program. In my situation, in March of 1973, I was in the training program, and people were constantly falling asleep in the middle of lectures. They'd have something like water and oatmeal for breakfast, a butter sandwich for lunch, and a rice casserole for dinner. Something obviously deficient in protein. People were instructed to carry pins and prick their neighbors so they wouldn't fall asleep during the lecture, and this made a person extremely suggestible.
I'm constantly reminded that my viewpoint is smaller than God's. I'll accept that. The question is whether I can trust my own judgment on anything. Satan is so quick to enter my mind and poison my thought.
Next, tremendous emotional pressure is applied in the form of guilt and fear, so that a person would think they were turning their back on God if they even considered the possibility of leaving the church. I would personally counsel people in the workshop. Tell them that God was counting on them to stay right there on the premises and learn the ideas. And they were confused. But they thought, what if I really might be missing the truth? So they stayed out of guilt that if they left, they'd be doing something that was really wrong.
I looked up the word religion. It comes from the Latin word rogare, to bind back. It means like to bind with God. And I feel that's been the most important aspect of my life.
Were there other pressures?
Yes, there were. People who we considered to be potential disruptors would be weeded out and sent back to New York City so we could keep control of the atmosphere.
Did you use these tactics on new members?
Yes, I did.
Approximately how many?
I would estimate approximately 1,500 to 2,000 potentially new converts, and another 1,000 to 1,500 who were already members of the Unification Church.
What was your success ratio?
I had about a 70% ratio of successes. In other words, about 70% of the people who began the workshop would feel compelled to join the Unification Church after 2.5 days.
Once they joined, could you control their movement?
I could control them completely. I had an individual, for example, come up to me one time and ask me if it were truly spiritual for him to use the hot water faucet on the sink in the washroom to wash his hands, because it's on the left side, and the left side is considered satanic. People would ask me how they should feel about their families, their friends from before the movement, and I would give them clear directions as to how to cut off these relationships, and they would, in all cases that I can recall.
I must admit it still troubles me that Reverend Moon may someday choose a husband for me. And it might be someone who doesn't even speak English. I don't look forward to that blessing.
You used the term satanic. What's that?
Satanic is a concept in the Unification Church, which means any influence that comes from the outside world.
How did you use the concept of the satanic in controlling individuals?
A person was indoctrinated in such a way that they felt any dissenting opinion was a satanic attack. And so we controlled them through that.
Sing from Shaw.
Yea, we must be reborn out of barren or crackling sleep, into jackets of fur to walk this land America. Yea, we must be peacemakers, ready to forgive death leaders and new followers, willing to guide every citizen as a child into that true and promised land, where unity reigns responsible in the Father's sacrificial heart, beating for the world. Choo, 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 yeah, wow, yeah, wow, yeah, wow.
Part 2, expert testimony. Fran Curtis, one of the 4 attorneys for the parents in the trial of the Faithful Five, as Barbara Underwood's trial came to be called by the press, made this statement about expert witnesses in her summation. One of the things which my experience in practicing law and being a trial lawyer has taught me is that in any kind of a case which calls for scientific testimony, 2 scientists will look at the same data and come up with diametrically opposed opinions. Attorney Richard Soroyan responded to that, saying she was trying to find a way of getting out of her weak testimony.
Please state your names and addresses.
Martha Isaacson, ISAACSSEN, 8192 Largan, Berkeley, California.
Philip Greenberg, GREENBERG, 1420 37th Street, Northwest, Washington, D.C.
Catherine Johnson, JOHNSON, 12779 Mar Vista Boulevard, Hawthorne, California.
Proceed.
I'm a physician specializing in psychiatry. I have a BA from Harvard College and an LLB from Harvard Law School. I graduated in 1964 from the University of California Medical Center, and I was a staff psychiatrist at the National Institute of Mental Health, the Center for the Study of Crime and Delinquency for 2 years. Blogging for term which uses many areas. Football, for example, but it is also used in psychiatry. Her effect was not blunt. She was cry, serious, but she moved from laughter to sadness, and I found her functional vocabulary to be superior to her problem. I was very impressed with her ability to have what I would call cognitive integration. She referred to the Danish philosophers.
She had claimed that she had read my code. From my studies of the former prisoners of war, from my evaluations of Miss Patricia Hearst, and from talking with former Moon Organization members, I was very interested in Miss Underwood. It was not possible to get her to make any type of a negative evaluation about anything. Former Unification Church members had told me that they had had prolonged training experience not to express negativity. She has lessened awareness or willingness to deal with comparisons between one idea or another, one event or the other. I feel that Barbara Underwood would be at the mercy of artful and designing persons. Because of her present status, because of reduced general critical judgment, some evidence of faulty memory, and a tremendously reduced attention to all sources of information outside the publications of the Unification Church.
A person who is susceptible to deception would have difficulty with orientation. That is, they might not know where they are. So I asked her the question, where are you and who am I? Questions of this type. And she knew who she was with. She did say when I asked her what the date was that it was the 12th of March. In fact, it was the 14th of March, and upon slight reflection, she corrected herself. So she was oriented as to time, place, and person. Miss Underwood's long-term memory was not impaired. She was able to describe the experiences that she had in childhood having to do with her first exposure to what she called the Unitarian Church or the Unification Church. She wasn't quite sure. There seemed to be no long-term memory loss at all. I believe Miss Underwood is no more susceptible to being deceived by artful and designing persons than the average citizen. She falls within the range of susceptibility of that of ordinary persons, healthy individuals, normal individuals in society, if you will. I think everyone is susceptible, in the usual meaning of the terminology artful and designing, at some point of being deceived.
I ran the MMPI, which is short for the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, on Barbara Underwood, and the Rorschach ink blot test and the Mac-over draw a person test. I talked to her. It's always a good idea to gain some sort of rapport with a person before you begin testing. To complete all of the testing, we're talking about 2 hours. Now, as I have indicated, the results of the MMPI and the Rorschach show Barbara to be a very extroverted person, falling within the normal range of behavior. The results of the draw a person test also showed a feminine personality. It showed she had basically controlled behavior, but with some impulsiveness. The central placement of the drawing shows she's a normal, reasonably secure person. I didn't find anything in any of the few tests which I conducted that would suggest that Barbara Underwood would be a person who would be susceptible to being deceived by artful and designing persons.
Part 3, heavenly deception. Heavenly deception is, bluntly, lying. The idea is that if I told you that I was raising money to lay the financial foundation for the physical kingdom of God on earth, you'd think I was crazy. So I come up to you, and I say, hi, my name's Gary. I'm working with a Christian youth project. Could you help us out a little?
Please state your name and address.
My name is Barbara Lael Underwood, 2269 Washington Street, San Francisco.
Miss Underwood, would you kindly tell me your date of birth?
February 17, 1952.
And that makes you how many years old?
I'm 25 years old.
And after high school, did you go to college?
Yes, I did.
What college did you go to?
The University of California in Santa Cruz.
And did you move in the circles of any political groups?
In my sophomore year, I was becoming more and more involved in the studies of Karl Marx. You might say I was becoming more socialistic in my thinking, communistic.
What was your church affiliation prior to joining the Unification Church?
I had no real church affiliation, but I was very interested in my father's allegiance to Quakerism. He called himself a Quaker, and often I would ask to go to Sunday Quaker meetings with him whenever I was home.
Miss Underwood, had you experimented with drugs at all?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this. I don't see what dragging her through the mud is going to do to help this hearing. I'm going to object quite strenuously on behalf of her mother and on behalf of her father, and on her behalf, that this shouldn't be brought out in the courtroom. It doesn't have any probative value.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead.
Counsel says she doesn't want to drag her through any mud, Your Honor. They're the ones that drag a lot of mud out here. They're saying now this young lady here is frozen. They brought up a lot. The psychologist and psychiatrist brought up her sex life, and I ask about drugs, and counsel gets up, and it's all completely relevant as to how she was before, if Your Honor, please, and what happened afterwards. It's all a part of this whole picture. Before Your Honor can really judge the situation, we have to know about this person before she joined the church. What type of mental capacity she had. All this is very relevant.
My understanding is that past morality is not an issue here. They've repeatedly said we're not trying the church. I assume they're trying to link up somehow that she's a better person. I'll stipulate to that. I just don't see how getting specific as to any past misdeeds is going to have any probative value for the court. And I strongly object to it, Your Honor. I don't think she should be forced to go into each and every past
I'm not
moral
going to
detail.
permit it. I'll allow a couple of questions.
Very limited, Your Honor.
A couple of questions on this. Overrule the objection. I think it's material on the point that was brought out.
Your Honor, can we accept the stipulation that she's a better person since she joined the church? That stipulation?
I didn't offer any stipulation. I'd probably say she's gained some good from being involved in her group, and I'd so offer that stipulation.
I'll accept that stipulation, Your Honor.
Certainly.
All right, then, that's a stipulation. Proceed, please.
Tell us a little bit about the proceedings with drugs that you went through.
There was a lot of experimentation going on. Personally, I tried hallucinogens twice. One was LSD, and I really had good experiences. In fact, I even wrote an article about it because it kind of opened up a new sensory part of my life. And occasionally I tried marijuana.
All right. Now, at the home you were living in, I believe they brought out the fact that some of the people there were practicing homosexuality.
I'm going to object again, Your Honor. One is as to relevancy and materiality. But also we've stipulated that there are some things, and I believe my stipulation was accepted, and there's no need to go into this area now.
I'm just going to give 2 questions on it, Your Honor. I'm sorry. This is my last question on it.
I don't see the relevancy of raking her over the coals over her past life.
She's already been raked over the coals. I'd just like a couple of questions. I have a right to do that.
All right, I'll allow a couple of questions. Overrule your objection.
Proceed. Do you want to answer that question?
Could you repeat the question?
The question was, I understand you were living in a home where some of the people there were practicing homosexuality. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what was the number, or what was the situation there generally?
I'm going to object to that. That calls for a narrative. And I think most of her answers have been in the narrative.
I'll rephrase it.
Please do it by question and answer.
How many people there were practicing homosexuality?
Objection. It's irrelevant as to how many people there were.
Yes, I'll sustain that objection.
Did anybody put pressure on you in any way to follow this particular course?
The whole idea of homosexuality was becoming more and more a part of the political awareness of the people who got oppressed by, you know, locked into sex roles. Personally, I never thought it was natural, so I never really got involved.
All right, now, could you tell us what was your first exposure to the Unification Church?
It was with a roommate of mine named Christine Brown, who'd come to Santa Cruz from Berkeley, where she'd met this group. We shared a lot about theology and read a lot of Kierkegaard together.
Read who?
Kierkegaard.
And he is what? What's his first name?
Soren, he's a Christian philosopher.
A Swedish theologian, is he?
Uh-huh.
He wrote a paperback, didn't he? Is that correct? Is that a gentleman?
Yes,
That's a
he did.
leading question.
It's a minor detail here.
All right, let's move along here, please.
When did you actually sign up or join the Unification Church as such?
It was really a long, drawn-out process. It was actually a very deliberate process on my part.
You recall, you said 1973.
It was actually about April 10th, 1973.
Miss Underwood, were you fooled or deceived into joining the Unification Church?
No. I was a person who wanted to change. In fact, I had an opportunity to attend 2 workshops with the Unification Church.
All right. Now, when did you attend these 2 workshops?
The first was in October of 1970.
Of what year?
1972. And the second was March of 1973.
At the first workshop, was their religion discussed?
Yes.
Did they pray?
Yes.
And did they eat there?
Yes.
What did they eat?
The meals were substantial. They reminded me of the meals I had at home with my folks.
And what else? Did they lecture? Did they have a lecture?
Yes.
Where was this, incidentally?
It was in Boonville, California.
This was in Boonville.
Yes, it was.
And, were you able to leave the area anytime you wanted to leave the area?
Yes.
Was there a person there with a lock and key as far as you know at that time?
I don't remember.
Well, was any coercion used upon you?
No.
Nobody ever used physical force on you?
No.
Okay, what was your reaction to what was going on?
I felt it was one of the most dynamic experiences of my life. I was being exposed to a set of ideas just more comprehensive than I'd ever studied.
Do you want to go to this floor?
I felt like in my research in university, I was trying to pull together the ideas like those of Marx and Freud and Wilhelm Reich and all sorts of others. And the ideas in the lecture seemed to touch on almost every single base.
Let me say that a significant part of this case is that in a period of a week or 2, we have here a person who made a complete turnaround in almost every aspect of her intellectual, social, moral consciousness and attitudes. And this aspect, I mean this turnaround, took place following her involvement in the new educational development system. Now, I could understand if this turnaround was as a result of some miraculous revelation, a revelation coming from a higher being under circumstances which biblical history is full of. They had seen the light and changed from a way of life which was of one nature to a way of life which was of another nature. I could understand that, and I wouldn't have any problem with what happened to this individual. But I have that problem, because that isn't what she testified to.
I decided at the end of the second week to join the group, although no one asked me to. In fact, once I'd made my decision, I was the one going to go and find someone to tell them about it.
And did you discuss with your parents this, what shall I call it, your decision?
In depth.
And after having this discussion with your parents, where did you go then?
I went back to my radical community house in Santa Cruz for about 3 days. Got my pack together and got a ride to San Francisco. I caught a bus over to Berkeley with my pack and belongings, and then I walked into the house and was greeted warmly.
And what was the place? What house? Where was this at?
6502 Dana Street in Oakland.
And that's in Berkeley.
That's in Oakland.
Oh, Oakland. I'm sorry. I was born in Berkeley. I know that part of town. Dana is in Berkeley, though. Now, when you moved in, I believe it was in February of 1970?
April.
I'm sorry. And that's when you actually joined?
Yes.
Now, a few moments ago, you mentioned you had written a journal. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this journal contains your thinking with reference to the church and your questioning. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
At this time, if Your Honor, please, I'd like to mark for identification. First of all, is this the journal?
Yes, it is.
I'd like to have marked for identification this journal.
All right. Let's see, this will be B. Objectors, B for identification. If you're going to use it, I'd suggest you let opposing counsel see it.
Well, the only thing that we request is that there's some very personal information in the journal, and we'd like a protective order as to that part of the journal.
Well, I understand that, but I'd like you to let them look at it first, and I can rule on it after.
On the complete journal?
Yes.
Well, this is a copy.
Well then, give them the original. Let them look at it.
I think it is significant in the case of Barbara Underwood that we have in evidence a journal which she prepared and which reflects, as you read it, her personality, her interests, her ambitions, and her goals. And at the beginning of this document, which was written before she comes into the church, she expresses concepts, challenges, philosophies, and a wide range of interests which are unexceeded in any young adult that I know of. She is seeking in a way in which I've rarely seen a person seek. And in just 6 months, this journal has turned into a document in which she is reciting the words of other people and doesn't manifest one single thought of her own.
Now, would you tell us, Miss Underwood, what was your relationship with your parents prior to joining the Unification Church?
Very good. They were the most important people in my life. I felt a tremendous love for them.
And how many times have you visited them, say, in the last year?
None.
Okay, has there been a reason for this?
Generally been out of town.
Has there been any other reason?
Yes, there have been many things happening in regard to the kidnapping of people very close to me in our community by their parents.
You understand that your parents have filed a petition to be declared both your permanent and temporary conservators. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
What's your reaction to that?
When I first discovered it, I was really shocked. I felt that they had a basic amount of respect for my integrity and decisions and the way I choose to live my life. Their actions are sincere, but I feel they are acting really wrongly.
Are you happy presently?
Yes, I am.
Is that a real happiness? Or is that an artificial happiness?
It's as real as I've ever known happiness.
Now I'm going to ask you. Did you write this? Let's take page 1.
Yes, I did.
When did you write it?
I believe that's about April 4th,
Of what year?
1973.
Was this before or after you joined the Unification Church?
It was before.
I see here. The time to speak out against an injustice is when it occurs. Can you carry on a sexual revolution and still feel you need the love of a man? On April 4th, the family fills me with terror. Now, Miss Underwood, I note you state here, the family fills me with terror. You talk a lot about many things. Now, what was it that you feared about at that time? What was the reason for making a statement like that?
I felt that this step was the most important decision I'd made up to this point in my life, so I was afraid to leave behind the things I was secure in.
You didn't go into this blindly, did you?
It was with tremendous deliberation.
Now, I noted at the top of page 2. I am frightened of the family for its importance in my life, its thrust at universality. I will judge it on its patience of love, its denial of coercion. Did you write that?
Yes, I did.
Before you joined?
Yes.
Do I fear appeal to conscience, especially an authoritarian superego formed through teachers and preachers and fathers and... I keep reading right here.
Guilt and blame?
And... what have I done?
Penis?
And guilt, blame. Can a family join morality and passion? Are they non-erotic? How open is the struggle to critical thinking? What is forbidden?
Your Honor, at this point, I think the journal is an evidence that it doesn't need to be read.
Yes, in the interest of time, I'd like you to refrain from reading a lot of materials. And
Yes.
the court will take it into consideration because it is an evidence.
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. Proceed.
I'm just going to read some limited parts.
Your Honor, reading limited parts, I just don't think adds anything to it.
It is an evidence, Mr. Saroyan,
That's right, Your Honor.
so it doesn't need to be read at this time. Please proceed.
Thank you. Miss Underwood, what are your future plans?
I hope someday to marry and have a family. I plan to finish my education in my journalism and photography, continuing my writing. And I would love to look into teaching.
Do you feel this is preparing you for your future life experience?
Yes, and I'm grateful for it.
I think that's all.
Mrs. Underwood, how are you holding up?
It's a good thing we didn't know how difficult this all was going to be.
Did Mr. Underwood return to Portland?
Yes, he had to go back to work.
I thought both you and Mr. Underwood testified beautifully. I was particularly impressed by the strength of his convictions about civil liberties.
It's ironic that the ACLU has filed a brief against us. I'm not at all sure we'll win.
You'll win.
What makes you say that?
Judge Laboris has granted ex-party conservatorships to parents of Moonies all along. She's not going to reverse herself now.
But this isn't ex-party. The church is presenting its case, and they've literally put the press in the jury box. Even if we do win, there's no assurance that Bob's deprogramming will work.
That's true, but the percentage of successes is very high.
But what about all the lies she's come to accept as truth?
Those lies can be penetrated by honesty. The real question has to do with her ability to endure the pain of her broken dreams.
Was your deprogramming painful?
Yes. I was not abused. I was given time to think and to reflect and to study the Unification Church objectively. And through my parents' patience and caring, I was able to rediscover my love for them.
Gary, I'm so afraid we've lost her. After she went into the movement, it seemed like all the life had been drained out of her. The first summer when she came home was very hard for all of us. The way she talked, that was the first feeling we had that we were dealing with somebody very, very different. Before she went in, she actually wrote in her journal, "I'm afraid, I'm scared. I'm afraid I'll be like the captives in the Michelangelo sculpture, where they are half finished and caught in a marble."
And that could happen to me.
After she seemed unable to think as a mature person and respond to really strong questions. And that was not our Barbara.
Proceed.
Barbara, have you ever been a witness before?
No.
I'm going to ask you certain questions, and I'm going to try my best to frame them in a yes or no. And would you please answer yes or no? And there's the explanation, and your counsel will bring it up on his additional questions, okay?
Okay.
Prior to living with the Unification Church, did you have an interest in photography?
Yes, I did.
Approximately how many hours a week did you spend on photography?
About 5 to 10 hours.
5 to 10 hours. And you were a very talented writer prior to joining the group, isn't that correct?
I tried to write a lot.
You're modest. How many hours a week did you spend on writing?
About an hour a day.
An hour a day, about 7 hours a week. And did you used to hike a lot also, Kurt, during the group?
Yes, I did.
Did you enjoy hiking?
Sure, I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't.
Did you used to cave also?
Yes.
What is caving?
Well, in my case, it's going and exploring caves and sinkholes and going down on ropes into passages that are sometimes more than 40 miles long. We would band mass together and do surveys. Surveys of the biology of the area.
Was that fun?
It was great.
When you were in college, were you like most young people? And did you have a sincere desire to make the world a better place to live in?
A real passion for that.
Were you concerned about the rights of the oppressed?
Yes, I was.
Were you concerned about women's rights?
Yes.
Did you do anything politically to help further the women's rights movement?
I was involved in a women's health clinic that was happening upstairs from where I was living. And I was also very interested in going to women's talk groups. And I was also very inspired by my mother's research and writing historically about the involvement of women's rights in America. I took a course on feminist literature. And I also helped write a magazine article about writers and poets, women authors.
Were you concerned about the rights of minorities?
Yes, I was.
What minorities?
Well, I did some political work on the problem of unionizing farm workers. And I was also very interested in the problem of the elderly in America as being a real minority that didn't have much representation.
Did you do anything politically to help further the interests of the elderly?
I helped establish a discussion line for the Senior Citizens Board in Santa Cruz. And then I spent about 3 months researching and writing an in-depth article about nursing homes and the problem of the elderly in Santa Cruz.
For the past 12 months, approximately, you've been on the road, on a fundraising team. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
If you have the flowers and the merchandise, and you're physically capable of working, you usually work 6.5 to 7 days a week, from early morning to late at night. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Were you surprised when your parents filed for a conservatorship over you?
I really couldn't believe it.
You really didn't expect them to infringe upon your rights and try to get a conservatorship over you, did you?
No, I didn't.
It came as somewhat of a shock, didn't it?
Yes.
Didn't you say on direct examination that you originally didn't go home because you were afraid they'd try to get a conservatorship over you?
I had some fear of that.
Didn't you just say it came as a complete shock and surprise that they tried to get a conservatorship over you?
It did. And in reality, at the moment, yes.
So that isn't really the main reason that you didn't go home for the past year, is it?
I'd say that's one of 2 reasons.
Is the main study guide in the Unification Church the divine principle?
Yes, it is.
It's the equivalent for the Christians to the Bible, is that correct?
The main body of ideas we study.
Who wrote the divine principle?
Reverend Sun Young Moon.
Is it a set of principles that you try and live your life by?
Yes, it is.
Didn't you tell your parents within the last week that you'd only read about 1/3 of it, and that in fact you hadn't read the entire divine principle?
I told them I hadn't read the last word.
Didn't you?
Wait just a minute. Let her answer the question.
Direct your remarks to the court, please.
I'm sorry.
Just direct your remarks to the court.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
If there's an objection, Mr. Soren,
Scared me.
just direct your remarks to the court.
I'm sorry.
She's trying to answer the question.
I'm sorry. If I did interrupt you, Barbara, it wasn't intentional. I'm sorry.
Did you finish your answer, Barbara?
I'm finished.
All right, next question.
I'm going to rephrase it because after Mr. Saroyan yelled at me, he just sort of scared me and I lost my train of thought.
All right, let's move along here.
She's commenting to me, Your Honor, to me. She said he scared me in all this.
Let's slow down.
Okay, now when you say you haven't read it from cover to cover, there are large portions of the divine principle that you haven't read.
Of that book? That text?
Yes, the text, which is the equivalent for the Christians of the Bible, which is the main set of guidelines that you try and live your life by. With the long parts you never even read.
We have 2 main guidelines which outline everything in that text, and I've read both of them thoroughly.
But you haven't read the entire divine principle, is that correct?
That's correct.
In fact, you were telling the truth to your parents when you said you'd only read about 1/3 of it.
Yes.
We'd stipulate to that.
Well, Your Honor, I don't think there's anything before the court for Mr. Saroyan to be making comments about.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
In other words, you're refusing stipulation. Is that correct? So the record is clear?
Stipulate, if that's an offer to stipulate. I just meant that it's usually not...
That's what he said. He said he'd stipulate she hasn't read large portions of the book Divine Principle.
It's usually not the proper time and usually not in the middle of the cross-examination.
I don't know of any rule of evidence that says it can't be done at any time. Please proceed.
I'll gladly accept the stipulation.
All right.
Is Mr. Gordon Reed a close friend of yours?
A very good friend.
Would you consider him one of your better friends?
He has been. We work very closely together.
Are you looking forward to talking with him?
At some point.
I'll object to that, Your Honor. I can't see the relevancy for looking forward to talking to Mr. Reed. I will let her answer if you think she should.
All right, then, you're withdrawing that objection?
Well, I will object.
I'll simplify the matter. I'll overrule your objection.
Okay, it's all right. It's okay.
I asked for a yes or no answer. Are you looking forward to talking to Mr. Reed? I know you've talked to him in the past, so you are looking forward to continuing your discussions with him.
Yes.
Was he a good member when he was in the Unification Church?
A very good member.
In fact, one of the better members.
I admired much that he did.
Does the Unification Church believe in the blood of the Lamb?
What was that question again?
Does the Unification Church believe in the blood of the Lamb?
I believe that's incompetent, immaterial, and irrelevant to the issue of the case, whether they believe in the blood of the Lamb or not.
Your Honor, I have an avowed purpose for asking this question, and I'm going to connect it up with the next question.
All right. Is that the same text that's used in the New Testament?
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
All right. I'll overrule that objection. Go on.
All right.
Does the Unification Church believe in the blood of the Lamb?
That's not a specific teaching of the divine principle.
Have you ever told anyone that the Unification Church does believe in that doctrine? And have you been ordered to deceive them in order to get them to give you a gift?
I'll object to that, Your Honor. The issue is, has she been deceived?
Overruled. I'm going to allow it.
This is an important point, Your Honor. That's not relevant to the issue here in this particular situation.
Your Honor, I merely want to show and find out if she's been forced to lie in behalf of her group in order to collect money, which would be against her prior principles.
Overrule the objection.
Why doesn't she ask the question, is she forced to lie?
I'm going to. Thank you, Mr. Saroyan.
All right. Proceed.
Have you ever lied to anyone and told them you believe in the doctrine of the blood of the Lamb in order to get them to give you a gift?
Object to that again, Your Honor, on the grounds that it's incompetent, immaterial, and irrelevant to the issue of the case, and there's not sufficient foundation laid here.
I'm trying to lay it.
Overrule the objection.
Right?
Can I answer with an explanation?
Yes.
First answer yes or no, and we'll discuss it in a minute.
Repeat it, please. Repeat the question so there's no question.
I'll be glad to. Have you ever lied to anyone and told them you believe in the doctrine of the blood of the Lamb in order to induce them to make a donation to the Unification Church? Yes or no, Barbara?
I'll say no, and I'd like to explain.
Well, you can explain when Mr. Saroyan asks you the question.
Wait a minute.
I'll allow her an explanation now. I'll allow you to explain.
I'd say probably, I'd surmise about 3 years ago, I was selling flowers door to door in apartments in Hayward. And a woman came to the door, a very elderly woman, and I asked her if she would contribute to our youth guidance program. And then she asked me the question about do I believe in Christ and the blood of the Lamb and God and things of that nature. And I said yes. And then she contributed some money.
And that's why you did it. You didn't do it to deceive her?
No.
Then why did you write in your book on page...
Excuse me, where are we quoting from now?
Your Honor, I'm quoting from page 65, the first paragraph.
Is that an evidence you're talking about?
Yes, Your Honor, I'm talking about her diary or journal, I believe it's been called.
So the record is clear what exactly you're reading.
Does the Unification Church believe in the blood of the Lamb? I answered, of course. New sentence. We must be adaptable. Did you write that?
It's in there. I probably wrote it. I don't remember writing it.
There are times when you must become adaptable for the Unification Church. Is that correct?
That's what I wrote.
Are you familiar with the doctrine of heavenly deception?
I've heard the allegation.
Isn't it a fact that the term heavenly deception is a doctrine that the Reverend Moon espouses in order to justify lying to people during fundraising times?
Never heard him say anything about it.
It's in the writings, though, isn't it? It's the doctrine of the Unification
I've
Church.
discussed the idea of heavenly deception.
Are you aware of this doctrine?
Yes, I am.
Barbara, do you believe that it's possible to have truth without honesty? Your Honor, I have something I'd like to draw to the attention of the court. It is my understanding that Mr. Mark Reed, who is a leader in the Unification Church, is signaling to Mr. Jerry Harris, who's been signaling to the witness in numerous different ways of gesture.
Who's the gentleman?
There are two gentlemen, Mr. Mark Reed and Mr. Jerry Harris, and Mr. Jerry Harris has been signaling to the witness.
I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but I want to tell you what the rules of this court are. The rules of this court are, if there are any hand signals, eye signals, heads, I consider that to be symbolic language, and the same as speaking by voice, and I don't allow it in this courtroom. Anyone that does it will be evicted from this courtroom, and he or she will not be allowed to return. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I'm telling you what the rules of this court are, so you will all know.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor, very much. Okay. While you were in the Unification Church, has anyone ever kicked you? Physically kicked you or physically punched you?
I think that's irrelevant, Your Honor, to the issue of the case.
Well, Your Honor, if someone has deceived, or they are artful and designing persons, and they're using violence, physically abusing them, I think it's important to know.
All right, I'll overrule that objection. Please go ahead.
What do you mean? I mean, has anyone ever physically taken their foot and placed it on your posterior in the form of a kick?
Your Honor, that's got so much sarcasm. She could question the witness, but the sarcasm called for in that question.
I'm sorry, I don't see any sarcasm. It might have been a symbolic kick, I don't know. Symbolism is used in religion. All right, let's move along here, please.
Let me be more specific. Did Andrea Wolf ever kick you when you were in the group?
Yes.
Did she physically kick you? Now, earlier you testified that you didn't remember anyone physically abusing you in the group.
Didn't feel it was physical abuse.
Did you write in your book on page 82 that one of your rebirth experiences was being kicked by Andrea Wolf, showing me my fear of disapproval, an ancestral hang-up? Did you write that?
Yes.
Is that your writing?
That's my writing.
Do you have doubts about the Unification Church?
I have doubts.
Doubts about your own involvement in the Unification Church?
Not about my own individual involvement, no.
You stated that one of your primary goals is to be married and have children in the Unification Church. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Now in the Oakland family, how many people are in the Oakland family?
Say there's about 300 people.
300 people. And what is the ages there? What's the overall age range?
18 to 80.
And what's the average or median age?
25.
All right, then how many people in the Oakland family are married?
12, I think.
12 out of 300. And how many of them have had children from the marriages in the Unification Church?
I think that's irrelevant, Your Honor. I'll object. It's irrelevant how many children they have.
Your Honor, I'm going to connect up the relevancy to the next question.
All right, I consider that a preliminary question. I'll allow it. Overrule the objection.
Can you rephrase the question?
Rephrase it or repeat it?
Repeat it.
Glad to. How many people in the Oakland family of the Unification Church have had children from the marriages that were consummated while they were in the group?
None.
None? Yet one of your primary goals is to be married and have children in the group. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yet of the 300 people in the Oakland family, none of them have had children. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Isn't it one of the teachings of Reverend Boone that once you're married, you can't live with your spouse for long periods of time?
No, that's not a fundamental teaching.
Is it one of the teachings?
No.
Have you? No. You haven't read the entire Divine Principle, have you?
No.
So you really don't know if that's in there or not, do you?
I haven't read it.
Barbara, do you still feel that you're the same person that started out with your sincere desire to change the world and make it a better place to live in? And do you feel that you're doing that by fundraising like you have been in the past year?
Yes, I do.
I have no further questions.
Well, what is it? Are you a member of a religious group or something?
Well, kind of, but not any fixed religion, you know.
Uh-huh.
You see, most of the people in our community come from some sort of a spiritual background, and we just try and see what we have in common. And you know, we often find that we have common ground.
Yeah.
You look like a really fine person. You know, I think you'd like it. Look, tonight's a really special night. We're having an open house if you'd like to come by. We're having vegetables and singing and skits. Bring an instrument and play one. Why don't you come by?
You're not a member of the movies, are you?
What, you mean that Chinese guy?
Yeah.
No, not at all. Look, why don't you come by?
Part 4, fundraising and witnessing. The enormous wealth of the Unification Church is largely due to the assiduous work of its members in raising funds. Members often raise in excess of $12,000 a month. Barbara Underwood estimates that she earned over $250,000 during her 4 years in the church. By recruiting new members, more potential fundraisers are brought into the movement.
Father, we are so pleased to be able to carry on your mission, to be able to do our part in establishing the financial foundation for your kingdom here on earth. Father, we recognize that Satan will try to prevent us from accomplishing our goal. But we know that if we try, that we can do your work. Father, we cheerfully accept rebuff and persecution as tests of our faith. We are so proud to be instruments of your will. Father, we will always remember that every flower that we sell means eternal life for the person who buys it.
Hey, what are you doing here? You sure getting around.
You want one? They're $1 a piece.
No,
It goes towards a good cause.
I don't care for good causes.
Yes, you do. I can see you're the kind of person that cares a lot about other people.
Oh yeah, you see that, huh?
Yes, and I can see you're cheerful and enjoy playing with people.
Yeah.
Oh, there, right?
Yeah. What else can you see?
We're called Kids of America. Our flowers cheer up someone's day. Fireworks are burning.
I'm on the road. Won't be home for 2.5 days.
Well then, come on for yourself. Put it in your dashboard. It'll smile at you all the way to Saginaw.
What about Saginaw?
That's where you're from, isn't it?
How'd you know that?
Didn't I tell you I could see a lot about you? I can tell you like sports, too. We run little league baseball teams for Kids of America.
How much are they?
$1. Aren't they beautiful?
I'll take one.
Sure you don't want to? They love girls on the team these days.
What's that got to do with it?
Nothing, just thought you might like to know.
All right, I'll take 2.
Great. Seth? Seth? You know what Oni says about sleepiness.
Hey, take it easy. We have to sell those flowers. It's okay. I was dozing. We've sold worse than these.
They're a mess.
Remember that bunch we sold was completely wilted?
You can't sell those.
Sure I can. Where's your faith? Don't be so negative. Hi, my name is Gordon. I don't believe in it and I don't want any. Watch this. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Hey, that's okay. They were a real mess to begin with.
Those are flowers?
That's what they were. I was trying to sell them.
Sell them?
I know, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it?
Well, you do look like a bit of a schlemiel.
What a day. I'm deaf on flowers. It's like my green thumb has turned to butterfingers. Oy vey.
So who are you working for, the Moonies?
Something like that. We're a Jewish youth group.
Hard luck.
I'll say.
So how much you sell those things for?
These?
I mean, ordinarily.
$2 a piece.
I'll buy the bunch.
These?
They'll go well in my place.
You must have some place.
I like them.
Then take them. They're yours.
No, I'll pay for them. A person should pay for what they get.
Well, all right.
And also, Father, we offer our prayers to our President Richard M. Nixon. May he survive this persecution and remain in office so that this country can be whole and stand firm in the world's view. It's time for you to speak, Father. It is our hope that Nixon will come to you for advice, for we know that God can transform him through you. After all, Nixon's corruption is the sin within each of us, and yours is the power to redeem us from sin. For this we pray. In true parents' name, Amen.
Please state your name and address.
Gordon Green, 11 Princeton Street, Trenton, New Jersey.
Go ahead, cross-examination.
Mr. Reed, what is your age?
I'm 25 years old.
And what is your educational background?
I attended the University of Pennsylvania for 2 years and the School of Engineering.
Were you involved in a group known as the Unification Church?
Yes, I was.
When were you involved in this group?
Well, I first came across the group in December of 1971 on the campus in Berkeley. I came across this large table that had this big sign that said, Ideal International City Project. There were 2 people standing at that table, Ellen Sagan and Judy Arnold.
What are the overall objectives of the Unification Church?
To establish a heavenly kingdom on earth. To obtain all the wealth where Reverend Moon is the leader, has all the power, and all the money of the world in his hands.
What is a fundraising team?
Well, basically a fundraising team consists of about 7 people who travel in a van throughout the country, and also recently in Canada as well, raising funds for the Unification Church.
And what does the typical day consist of for the average fundraising team member?
Well, we would get up at about 7 o'clock in the morning and kind of clean ourselves up, because oftentimes we'd have to sleep in the van at night. And we would go to a restroom somewhere, and then we would come back and prepare our flowers, wrap them into bundles so that we could sell them. And then we would have some sort of a little breakfast, usually some cereal, some fruit, some cottage cheese, and then we would have a reading from Master Speaks, which are the writings of Reverend Moon. And that would sort of give everybody a real strong punch or inspiration for the day.
What proceeded then?
Well, then everybody would go out on their runs, which are periods of time when everybody would be selling from door to door, business to business, in the evenings in the bars. Occasionally we would have a short break for dinner, and then we would continue to sell until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, usually about 1 o'clock.
Did you receive a salary for working for the Unification Church?
No, I didn't.
Did you receive any health benefits?
On the part of the organization? No, none.
Is there any pension plan?
No, no pension.
Did you receive or did they give you clothing and or personal items?
Well, the little clothing and personal items that I needed, I was able to get through the group.
What did you do with your own personal belongings when you came into the group?
Well, an important aspect in coming into the group is to give everything you have. To show your devotion, your faith, you know. And to become a good member, you have to give everything.
Are you personally acquainted with the proposed war in this case?
Yes, I am. I worked with Barbara Underwood in 1976, almost 9 or 10 months out of that year on fundraising teams. And we would work usually 18, 19, or 20 hours a day under very strenuous conditions. Very little food, very light sleep, as well as in any kind of weather.
Gordon, I've heard the term new educational development. What is the difference between the new educational development and the Unification Church?
Well, basically it's the same organization, the same staff members. You see, the director of the new educational development, Dr. Mose Durst, is married to the leader of the Unification Church of the state of California, Oni Durst. At least that's the way it was a couple of months ago.
Why do they have two different names? If you know, to the best of your knowledge, could you tell us?
Well, in inviting a person over to a center in the Bay Area, I would invite them over to a creative community project.
Why would you tell them that?
I was afraid they wouldn't come to dinner otherwise.
What would happen if you didn't fundraise for long periods of time?
Well, among other things, we wouldn't make any money.
What would that mean?
Well, the importance of raising funds was to help pay for the facilities that the Unification Church was purchasing throughout the country, especially very large training centers, very large estates, and very beautiful homes for the leaders of the organization. Those kinds of things.
Was there any other significance in making money?
Yes. Some of the money was channeled into a fund for buying personal gifts for the leaders of the group, like Reverend Moon, Oni Durst, Dr. Durst. Jewelry, coats, like a fur coat. Liquor, cars, like a Mercedes.
Was this money taken out of the money that was raised for charitable purposes?
Yes, it was.
Where did you get this information?
I personally was responsible for the funds that were raised by the fundraising teams. To every day, or every other day, have the money taken down to a bank where a cashier's check would be drawn up and then sent back to the organization in the Bay Area.
Part 5, deprogram.
Proceed, Mr. Soroyan.
Mr. Sharp, by whom are you employed?
I'm employed by the Freedom of Thought Foundation.
That is the deprogramming facility in Tucson, Arizona that Mr. Schmidt is the founder of?
One of the founders, yes.
In what capacity are you employed by the foundation?
I'm the director of the Rehabilitation Center.
I'm sorry, you're dropping your voice and I can't hear your answer.
I'm sorry. I'm the director of the Rehabilitation Center.
You're the director of the Rehabilitation Center, is that correct?
You could say that, yes.
Thank you. What qualifications do you have to be the director of rehabilitation?
I suppose you could say the most important aspect of my background, as it relates to my present job, is that I was a member of the Unification Church for 4 years.
Do you have any training in clinical psychology?
No, sir.
Do you have a degree in medicine?
No, sir.
You've indicated you were, what was it, the director of the coercive persuasion branch of the Unification Church, do you suppose? Is that how you describe yourself?
No.
Isn't it a fact that on your direct testimony you stated you were able to get people so confused they would have to come to you and ask whether to use the left-hand spigot or not?
I never said that I got them so confused. I said that I controlled them so completely they came to me for that type of advice.
I see. That clarifies it. You were able to control them so thoroughly they would have to come to you and ask whether to use the left-hand spigot or right-hand spigot on the faucet.
They got to that point, yes.
Okay. The Berry Town trip. Isn't it a fact that persons were isolated from their former friends and former experiences?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp, is it not a fact that one of the elements in the deprogramming process is the isolation of members from the friends in the Unification Church?
Yes.
And are they free to leave the treatment if they desire to leave the treatment?
No.
In fact, they are unable to leave the treatment.
That's correct. They're under court order.
And you make it quite clear they cannot leave. Is that correct?
We tell them that they are under court order and that they should stay and listen to our point of view, yes.
Thank you. To stay and listen to your point of view. Isn't that correct? That's what you said. Isn't that correct?
That's what I said, yes.
Now, isn't it a fact that at Barrington, one of the elements of indoctrination there is the refutation of prior religious beliefs that people going to Barrington had?
I'm sorry, I don't know the meaning of the word refutation.
Are you
trying to say refutation or repudiation?
It's unfortunate that I don't speak the English language very well. And
I'm
perhaps
not that good either.
And I apologize. You try to make them give up their prior religious ideas.
Yes.
In effect, what you are doing is tearing away their religious beliefs.
No.
At any time, do you bring out information that is extremely derogatory to the leaders of the religion?
We just bring out information that speaks for itself.
Isn't it a fact that you will continue to keep the people for as long as it is necessary in order for them to give up their beliefs in the Unification Church?
No.
So, at the end of 30 days, the person says, I want to leave, they offer you to leave?
That's correct. It's happened. I believe Miss Sandy Callenbach is in the courtroom. An individual who exercised that option.
Now, you've indicated that persons going through the deprogramming process do not spend the first days, the first 7 days at the deprogramming center. Is that correct?
I did not say that.
I'm sorry, that's what I thought you said.
No.
Where do they spend the first 7 days?
I never used the word 7. I may have said several.
Where do persons going through the process spend the first days after being put into custody?
It could be spent, it's usually spent near where the person had the papers served. It could be Tucson, it could be San Francisco, it could be a number of places.
Are you familiar with Sandy Kallenbach?
Yes.
Where did she spend the first days after being taken into custody?
I believe she spent that time in a motel room in Tucson.
And who was present in the motel room?
Tom Henderson Sr. was there.
And who is Tom Henderson Sr.?
He's a deprogrammer counselor.
Okay, he's a deprogrammer. Who else was present?
Tom Henderson Jr. was there.
And who is Tom Henderson Jr.?
He's the senior's son.
Well, that will make him very happy.
They are very close.
He's a deprogrammer, isn't he?
In my sense of the word, not yours.
Who else came by?
I think Mr. Schmidt may have come by.
And he is one of the founders of the foundation?
Yes.
Okay, who else came by?
Bob Blanchard was there.
Who is Bob Blanchard?
He's a friend of Tom Henderson Jr.'s who works with Tom Jr.
He's a deprogrammer, isn't he?
In my sense of the word, yes.
Who else came by?
There were a couple of other people there, but their names I can't recall. That was 5 or 6 months ago.
So, for several days, Sandy Kallenbach was held in a hotel room in Arizona with deprogrammers all around her. Is that correct?
No.
Well, isn't that what you just said?
You asked me who was present, and I told you. Sandy Kallenbach did not spend the entire time in the motel room.
She was free to go from the hotel.
Yes.
She could have left and gone back to San Francisco, I suppose.
No.
Isn't it a fact that she tried to escape and return to San Francisco?
I recall one specific evening. Well, she was sitting in a lounge chair beside the pool, and I went down to have a chat with her. Sandy Kallenbach did not spend the entire time in the motel.
He was not free to leave.
No.
I can't understand how they let you talk to me alone.
They didn't.
You're here against Donnie's orders?
Not against. Without. Marco was supposed to accompany me. I told him to go home.
You what?
I told him to go home. I didn't want to be accompanied.
You know that Oni wouldn't approve of you talking to me right now.
I imagine.
You know.
Okay.
I'm from Satan's world.
Seth, it was the first independent decision I made in the last 4 years.
It's Gordon. It's Gordon now. I changed my name back when I left the family. It makes a difference to me.
You didn't hear me. It's the first independent decision I've made in the last 4 years. Other than deciding which bar to hit first on a flower run.
Congratulations. How does it feel?
Scary.
I'll bet. So here you are with Satan of your own free will.
I know.
What does Oni say about me now?
She only refers to you by your last name.
What does she say? After all, I was one of the leaders of the Oakland family.
You'll let it go to your head.
Probably.
She explained to us that your loss was a sacrifice to Satan in return for some great gain that would come to the church. Seth, I didn't know what to do after you and Ellen left.
Don't you enjoy captaining the Raiders?
Come on. It isn't the same. I just had to talk to you. When Gary Sharp was on the witness stand, I didn't hear a word of it. I just kept repeating again and again to myself, smash Satan from Gary Sharp, smash Satan from Gary Sharp. But when you were up there, I listened to you.
The trial's not even over yet. It sounds like your deprogramming has already begun.
I felt trapped. My mother cried when she got on the stand.
Crowds and the media. They're making a big thing out of all this. They've put the press in the jury box.
I can't go back to Satan's world. I won't.
I thought that too.
Seth,
Gordon. It's Gordon now.
I told Oni about our friendship.
What?
I told her. She gave a dinner to brief us for the next day, and she kept questioning me about my affection for you. I didn't say anything then, but afterwards we went to the parlor and I confessed.
I'll bet she was pleased.
That's Satan's world speaking.
That's Father's reply.
I'm not leaving the church. Father's truth will win. This trial will be a great moment in the history of the movement.
So what did Oni do?
What could she do?
But you still had to appear in court.
The next day she told the leaders that I thought of you as more than a brother. She gave it to them when she pulled out of me the night before.
They invoked Satan to manipulate you.
Did the deprogrammers tell you that?
Let me figure it out for myself. You know, deprogramming isn't the torture that they make it out to be.
I don't want to hear about it.
You can read books, any novels you like. You could write again.
Seth, don't try to sell deprogramming.
You could see your friends outside of the church.
Seth, don't bother.
It's a compassionate experience. It's loving.
I'm going to win my trial.
You have too much to offer.
I offered to Father.
God exists outside the church too.
What?
It's the hardest thing for me to understand. There's goodness in the world out there. You can lead a good life. You can be a religious person and not be a moony.
Seth, don't bother.
Okay.
God's will prevail.
Use your head. Bevar's is strong on the family. She'll go with the parents.
She will recognize our right.
And if she doesn't?
We'll win our appeal.
You let them murder your reputation to make it look like they saved you from drugs and sex and communistic philosophy.
They did save me.
Well, I'll bet you're a hero now. I'll bet the younger members of the group come and touch you like a holy person.
Why are you acting this way?
What does Reverend Moon say about the trial?
He says that it's one of the greatest moments in the history of the church since the time of Christ.
Congratulations.
Why are you being so negative?
Because I've been sitting in there listening to you lie. Your father's a lawyer. How could you perjure yourself that way? Don't bother. I caught Mark Reed and Jerry Harris signaling to you.
Do you see Emma now?
Yeah, I saw her last week.
How is she?
You're supposed to think of her as though she were dead.
I just wondered.
She's very happy.
Is she?
I know you think of us as sinners now.
In Satan's world, what should I think?
Part 6, the family, with a big F and small. Members refer to the Unification Church as the family, with a capital F, so as to make a distinction between their true parents, Reverend and Mrs. Moon, who gave them spiritual rebirth, and the parents who physically bore them. Reverend Moon has often been accused of alienating church members from their parents and or other family, with a small f. In response to this accusation, Moon says that when a child receives a greater truth and a greater love than that which he or she has known at home, it is only natural that they will leave the home.
Mrs. Underwood, you very dearly love your daughter, don't you?
Obviously.
Beg your pardon?
Obviously, I do.
Thank you. I know this is trying for you. But you have come here and you have asked for a very drastic remedy. You're basically saying that your daughter here is completely incapable of taking care of herself. Do you understand that?
She isn't capable at this point of making a freely arrived at decision.
We've talked about a change in her personality after she joined the Unification Church. And I'd like to talk a little bit about her personality before she joined it. You knew her before she joined it, didn't you? Did she confide in you?
Yes, she did.
Did she tell you her problems?
Yes, she did.
Did she tell you she was taking hallucinatory drugs down in Santa Cruz?
I knew she was smoking marijuana, and I have in my possession a very interesting article by my daughter about the taking of hallucinatory drugs.
A hallucinatory drug?
Right.
You were concerned about that, weren't you?
Yes, and I thought she was handling these problems very well. I had her assurance that this was an isolated experience.
Have you read anything about the drug culture that was in San Francisco in the 50s, 60s?
Yes.
The drug experiences that young people went through, the things that were on the street. Do you recall those?
She was home with us in vacation times, and I was not seeing a person taking drugs.
She confided in you that she was, in fact, taking drugs.
confided to me that she was smoking some marijuana.
That she was taking hallucinatory drugs.
That she had taken a hallucinogen.
Now, isn't it a fact that when she was down in Santa Cruz, she was living in a feminist commune?
It was called a radical house, and I would say it was feminist.
Didn't she tell you that all the other girls in the house were homosexual?
She said there was a pair. There was a couple who were homosexual. We discussed this, and she asked me how this fit into the feminist movement, and I disavowed it. When she first went into the house, she was afraid of the two girls, although they didn't indeed seem to be a personal threat to her. But later, they did seem hostile. You know, we talked about this. I was frightened, and she knew I was frightened.
And isn't it a fact that she went directly from there to the Unification Church or the New Educational Development?
I am not making a claim that she didn't have many frightening experiences in Santa Cruz. It was a frightening world there.
But isn't it a fact that if she's brainwashed of her beliefs here, that she will be free to go anywhere she wants?
Yes, but she would be free as the reliable, responsible, solid person that she basically is.
So if she wants to go back to this feminist movement, she would be free to go back there?
Well, I have to respond to that. I'm on the Governor's Commission for the Status of Women in the state of Oregon. And I don't necessarily think the word feminist is a black word. If my daughter went out into the world and believed that women should have equal opportunity in this world and that the ERA was correct, I wouldn't think that was perdition.
That was not the question. The question was if she wanted to go back to this commune down in Santa Cruz, would that be okay with you?
Do you assume that if she's not in the Unification Church, she has to be back in the radical house in Santa Cruz?
I really don't want to get into an argument with you. I would just like to know if you would deprogram her of that belief too.
I would not deprogram her using whatever phrase if she was back at the radical house.
Thank you. This time, if Your Honor, please, I have nothing further on cross-examination.
All right. Redirect.
I have none, Your Honor.
All right. You may step down, Mrs. Underwood. All right. I understand now that both sides have heretofore rested, and there is no further evidence to be heard before this court. It is, therefore, the opportunity for both sides to present their final oral arguments. Miss Curtis, will you begin?
Your Honor, this case represents a novel and innovative procedure which has yet been untried prior to this court's accepting these suggestions. This is a case which is going to be decided, if you'll excuse me, by the heart, the eyes and the ears, rather than the erudition of the legal scholar. We are here on the petition of the parents, the petitioners, who have observed and testified to a deep concern over the welfare of their child because of observations that they have made that there has been a distinct personality change in their offspring. Now, I think it would be unfair to take these parents and attribute to them any motivation other than the motivation of love for a child and the desire to reestablish family ties, which were very important to this family. Mr. and Mrs. Underwood are only saying to you, Judge, we are very concerned over what we have seen in our child. We don't know what it is. And we only ask you, Judge, to put her with us for 30 days. And if after 30 days, the parents and the court and everybody is satisfied that this decision was made without some sort of mind control, some sort of persuasion, which would not be permitted in the law because it takes advantage of proclivities, then these proceedings will be terminated. And these parents will have had a chance to do what they otherwise would not have had a chance to do. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Sarai?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, please. Heretofore, in practically every case, these temporary conservatorships have been given in ex parte hearings lasting an average of 2 minutes, hundreds of them. It is certainly commendable that the court has given us all, both sides, this beautiful opportunity to look at the situation now. The essence of the temporary conservatorship is that if that is granted, it is pending the final conservatorship situation. I mean, that's the spirit. Under the rules of the court set forth, there has to be something urgent. And of course, the classic case is when there's an elderly woman on the street corner giving away her money. You can't just give a 15-day notice and say we'll go into a permanent conservatorship. You have to act immediately. And that immediate action calls for a temporary conservatorship to stop her from giving away her money. pending the hearing on the permanent conservatorship. The other side of the situation is when there's been an accident and someone can't write checks. You get a temporary conservatorship for that. And so we feel the law is being abused here. Actually, with reference to getting a temporary conservatorship. Because they don't want a permanent conservatorship. They want to get their hands on this young lady here who has chosen a particular way of life in order to break her of those ideas. Let them leave this young adult alone who has made a decision in an area of religion. If you're on a path, for instance, to heaven, anytime a parent disagrees with their young adult's thinking or ideas, well, just go down and get a temporary conservatorship. Put them someplace with the programmers and change their ideas. I mean, we have here kind of modern-day religious persecutions, Your Honor. This young lady is being persecuted because of what she believes. Absolutely. Now, the final issue here is this question of constitutional rights. And what we have here, if Your Honor please, is a blatant violation of this young adult's right to believe. And that's basic to our First Amendment, that Congress shall pass no law respecting an establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. They don't like moon. They don't like a lot of things. They don't like the fundraising. I can't. You know, when I got involved in this case, Your Honor, I just couldn't believe we were trying a case like this in America. It reminded me of communist Russia or Hitler Germany during the time of Hitler. I just can't believe we're here. And I say this with deepest humility, without trying to embarrass anyone. We want to lock Barbara Underwood up and we want to show her one side. Just bombard her with questions, which is what they do, you know. It's not just a paradise over there where they sit down and they play cards and this and that, and they come out later and they say, oh, I think I've changed my ideas, I'll go back home now. It's not just a party over there. They interrogate them. They insult them. They do a lot of things to them, and I would hate to have my child or any other human being subjected to that kind of mind change. For something like that to happen in America is unconscionable. And I'll say to Your Honor in this case, I won't say this to put pressure on you in any way, but it's receiving attention nationally and worldwide. If we make the decision here today, a decision that says that Barbara Underwood is incompetent, brainwashed, that she has to be locked up and forced to change her ideas, well, what will the world think of America? Really, I'll tell you, that's something we have to consider. This is a landmark case one way or another. Your Honor is really in the middle of a very historic case decision here. I've never heard of a case where a young adult, 25, is being told, you've been brainwashed into your ideas and we're going to change them. We're going to bring you back to normal so you can go back on the narcotics. Well, look at her. She was no angel from heaven, and I don't want to go into the details. Your Honor heard them all. What was she doing? Drifting. The youth of America is drifting today, if Your Honor please. That's why we have all these broken homes. She was drifting, all right. She was searching because she had tasted the world. She had tasted narcotics. Miss Curtis says, well, let's not go into detail. We'll stipulate she changed. That's right, she stopped. She had a real conversion. Does she want to go back to that now, Mr. Sharp? Puffing on his cigarettes, hurting his lungs? She stopped using narcotics. In fact, she stopped living with other people. She started to straighten up her morals. That's what America needs today. A moral conversion. That's what Billy Graham says. We need change and conversion. That's all that's happened here. And as far as this headline deception business is concerned, well, that's just a lot of foolishness. Okay, 2 weeks later, they tell her this is a good principle. She gets attracted to it. I mean, is she brainwashed? They take her down to Boonville for a little while. They tell her, well, this is Reverend Moon. She didn't know about... In fact, she took the stand, Your Honor, and she said it wouldn't have made any difference if she'd known ahead of time. I think it was Dr. Isaacson, either Isaacson or Emery, who said that he found that her love was too close to the surface, that you could just pierce the surface, and there you'd find love, concern. Well, Your Honor, if that's the case, then I need a conservatorship too, because they pierced my surface too. I try to follow the principle of love. I fail many times. I've never met Barbara Underwood before in my life. But if she has to go into a conservatorship or go to Tucson or wherever she has to go, I want to go there too. I'll take 30 days of vacation. I want to go and see that everything is okay. Because if Barbara Underwood's love is too close to the surface, that she's been brainwashed, that she is susceptible to artful and designing persons, then I'm in a like position. I've been deceived by the Seventh-day Adventists. I have 2 children. Today I think one of the most difficult things to do is to raise children. because they're just bombarded by television. In fact, probably the greatest brainwasher is television and the ideas on Madison Avenue. Where are you going to draw the line there? If these brainwashers want to brainwash, let them work on prostitutes and all these other people out there that need to be changed and improved. Barbara Underwood doesn't want a conservatorship. Her parents want it in order to try to change her. That's what we really have here, Your Honor. A blatant attempt to change her religious ideas. Now, the ACLU has prepared a brief here stating the constitutionality factors. Her religion is at stake. We have a religion here that they are trying to change improperly. So, finally, I conclude. And we pray. And again, I say this with sincerity. That God give us the wisdom of Solomon. That you make the decision here today that is in complete harmony with the truth. With the truth.
Today I'm about to make a decision. One side will like it, the other side will dislike it. But I want to tell you that I've studied this case. I've taken voluminous notes. I've lived with it. And the decision I'm making today is a decision that I feel is correct. If I'm in error, the attorneys from one side or from the other side will have the opportunity to take this case to a higher court. And I believe they will. And I believe it's only right that they should, because I'm only a judge sitting in Superior Court. We have to test this case. It's unprecedented. It's not a simple case, as I have said. We're talking about the very essence of life here. Mother, father, and child. A great civilization is based on many, many great families. And that's what's before this court. It's not a simple case involving some sort of property damage or monetary loss. It's the very essence of life. I've researched the law. I've studied this case. I've listened attentively to the witnesses and to the arguments. And I'm about to make my decision. My decision is as follows. The petition of Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Underwood for letters of temporary conservatorship over the person of their daughter, Barbara Lale Underwood, is hereby ordered granted. The law looks at that bond of love between a parent and a child. It is never ending. No matter how old we are, it's there. And that's one of the things that influence this court. The aforementioned letters of conservatorship shall be valid for a period of 30 days and shall commence Monday, March 28th, 1977. That's the order of this court.
Barbara.
I'm shocked.
Before we begin, there's a proposition I'd like you to consider. You're not God, and you might have made a mistake.
I'll never leave you anymore, for I have found in your bright eyes a river of love, a heart of gold, a peaceful mind, a hand to hold.
Why don't we just open it up for questions, because it's Pandora's box, as you can see. And go ahead.
Well, I'm kind of interested in what was the central issue and what caused you to change your mind and to go away from the church?
Well, I think, as the play indicates, there was something happening within me during the trial itself, and it was a collision of forces that suddenly seemed mutually exclusive in my life, and I hadn't, for 4 years, confronted the opposites so directly and so painfully. And what was really going on is that I was really two people throughout that 12-day hearing, and becoming more and more aware of the two sides of me being pulled in opposite directions. I had an enormous amount of respect for what my parents were really doing. And that was very difficult to reconcile with an ideological belief that I had subscribed to for 4 years, that they were satanic, and that any emotional tie I had with them was evil. It was a fearful influence. So I respected the fact that they wanted to give me an alternative viewpoint. And I knew that they didn't just want to possess me and control my life. On the other hand, there I was in the position of a representative of this movement that I felt required of me the same depth of commitment, the same faith that Moses and Noah and Jesus and all the great biblical characters had. And it was terrible. I mean, it was a tortuous kind of thing. And what really happened is that on the witness stand, as I was confronted with my own perjuries, my own falsification of real experience that I had in the movement, I had to face the fact that I couldn't be true to my conscience and stay in the Unification Church. So at the point of the trial ending and the conservatorship being granted to my parents, I certainly wasn't ready to leave the Unification Church, but I was ready to listen, and that was the beginning point.
I have a question. As a result of your experience with the church and maybe what you have learned after that experience from hindsight, what do you feel are the motives of the church in doing what they're doing with young people?
I was very sincere in my motivation, and I don't question that as the basis, the ground level basis for people coming into the movement. I was fervent, I was passionate, I was an absolute believer in the doctrine that Sun Myung Moon was the Lord of the Second Advent, and it actually saved my life spiritually. He was Christ's return. And I think even Moon himself believes that. I think he is sincerely deluded, but I think he's an absolute believer in his own persona, in who he is, and he feels he gets a mandate from God. So it's with, again, sincere intentionality, but I don't think that excuses the absolute and zealous and corrupted means that this group feels they have to use to get to their final goal of world conquest. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. That's my opinion. I mean, I've really struggled for, 5 years now trying to figure out who is this Sun Myung Moon, because he's had such an influence on my life, on our lives. We keep thinking about him. I still have dreams about the church and leaders in the movement to this day. It's, to some extent, still a contest of wills. There are fear and intimidation factors still in my life. But I basically rest assured that I have followed the path of my own integrity as much as I am capable of doing. And so the puzzle of who is Sun Myung Moon has preoccupied my mind, and I have not wanted to be unfair. But as I've gone back and reread all the documents that I hadn't finished reading when I was a member of the church, because I was out fundraising all the time, when I went back and read his speeches, when I assessed what I was doing, the lies I was telling, and the justification for those lies, I realized that it doesn't square up. There's something very wrong, and I think the error is idolatry. I think that I felt he was an ultimate representation of God, and he is not. He's a fallible human being. And the gravest error is that he has put himself in the position of God and carries with him that authority.
When you were fundraising, were you aware of the corruption?
Well, everything that went to Sun Myung Moon was a charity in my mind. It had its own justification.
Yeah.
And that was because the ideal was to convert everyone in the world to this movement. The only way to do that was to set up schools or centers where everyone could hear these doctrines and become converted as a result of hearing it.
Yeah. But did you see evidence of them having, like he brought up in the play, fur coats and the same things?
Sure, I was a participant in the purchasing of jewelry for Oni, and I knew of the Mercedes for Sun Myung Moon.
Yeah.
And I took care of Moon as a domestic servant for a couple weeks, and it took me 4 hours to cook meals for him, and the preparations were just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I justified it, and it was theologized on the grounds that the perfect human being deserves the very best, because all the things of creation are only of value when they are offered up to the perfect human being. So it was a part of the theology to give him everything.
One other thing that is really kind of hard to get, hard to grasp if you haven't been through some of the indoctrination, is that as you get more involved in the movement, your language changes. And the phrases and words that you use to refer to the things that you do come under the control of the people who control the words, namely the indoctrinators. So instead of saying, here I am manipulating someone, or here I am lying to someone, it's different language, and what happens is you lose your moral bearings. You know, and I think to a certain degree, the people who control your language can weaken your ability to measure your behavior. So, for example, when somebody was in a lecture, you know, you want to make that person become a member, for example, in what I was doing with you. And so you do anything to get them there, and you pressure somebody into, you know, are you really loving that person enough? Well, what that really means is, are you manipulating them effectively? But after a while, you don't know that you've made that switch over. Yeah. And you can in a very, very refined manner, very precisely guide and manipulate and rework with hideous immorality a variety of things without really knowing what you're doing, sort of passing over, measuring that against your previous reality.
I have a question. In your book, that after your programming had started, you chose to go back and stay with your parents for a weekend, and you were in the hotel room, and a Moonie burst into the room as if this person owned the room, because they were working for God, and they started ordering you around, and your reaction was, I want to think on my own. What were you really feeling like after you realized that that's what you said?
What was happening is I was beginning to feel myself treated like an enslaved person of a system. And the moment I experienced, particularly making that first decision on my own to see Gordon, to see the set, I began to get a feeling for what that was like, to make a decision. It's so hard to imagine not having, I mean, it's so hard, I'm sure, for you to imagine spending 4 years of your life not deciding anything for yourself, essentially succumbing to a higher authority, a leader who you take to be absolutely correct. But that was my situation. I submitted to that extent in the group. There are some people who don't submit to the extent that I did. Anyway, when I first experienced that ability to choose, I then realized that I wanted that for my life. I wanted to accept that kind of responsibility, and that I would be, I would really be capitulating to what was honest if I dismissed any future possibility of taking that responsibility in my decision. I think when in the book the Mooney leader comes in and basically sat me down, he said, do not talk to any deprogrammers. He said, read this cartoon book. It was a child's book about how to be obedient to authority. And he said, this is what you must remember. And I felt so pissed off when he did that to me. Now, 3 weeks earlier, I wouldn't have allowed myself to be angry. I would have accepted that as an older brotherly piece of advice about humility. But I found myself angry and manipulated, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore.
Do you feel at this point in your life that you are completely free of any of the indoctrination of the Mooney religion, or has it had any effects, residual effects, on your belief systems, i.e. feminism or religion or anything like that?
Let's see, do we have 3 days? Okay, the second question is more interesting, but let's see. The first question about anger to my parents. I was very angry. I felt trapped in a way because on the one hand I felt they were inviting me to a kind of captivity. On the other hand, as I was going through this trial, I was feeling a captive of presenting the movement in such an unblemished way to the world that I had to deny my own experience as real. And my own experience revealed a lot of not so pristine parts of the church. So I did feel angry at my parents in intervening in my life, but as the trial progressed, I felt dependent upon them to free me of the church. The fact that I could not, on my own, talk to my parents or ex-members, deprogrammers, because that would have meant being unfaithful to the movement, and here I was the leader of this corps of Moonies who was setting the example of faithfulness. I couldn't just let my brothers and sisters down. So I was hoping that my parents' effort legally and the judge's decision would in fact release me from the Unification Church to be on more neutral ground. And that was a peculiar kind of schizophrenia that I experienced. I later had to deal with a degree of anger towards my parents that took many months to work out. And that's because what they offered me was freedom, and that did not feel very comfortable. And so they were giving me the chance to be brokenhearted, having lost all my dreams and hopes and illusions, and not offering me any simple answers that were secure.
To be real.
Yeah. So I was angry that they took away from me this cosmic cocoon, the simplicity of life in the church. And they took away from me a guaranteed future, which is what the church offers in its teaching. And they gave me responsibility and a lot of things that are not so easy to accept. Now the second question about have my beliefs been influenced dramatically? I mean, it was pivotal experience in my life. And my religious beliefs, I would say primarily have been influenced. I feel I've been left with a great learning experience that has allowed me to be discriminating about systematic belief systems. I'm much more questioning. I realize that truth is not determined by sincerity or fervency of belief. I realize faith is faith means believing in the unknown. It doesn't mean having an absolute airtight system to rely upon. I mean, that's not faith, that's security. So my experience of faith is very different now. It really means trusting in God, whereas in the movement I trusted in a prefabricated system that was all around me. So that's a difference. Obviously, I'm affected too in an effort to try and resolve Christianity in my life by the fact that having devoted myself entirely to Sun and Moon as God, I can't make an easy transference to any other personage. So that it would be very difficult for me to say, believe wholeheartedly in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, because of what happened in my feeling of being betrayed by Sun and Moon when I had given those unreserved feelings towards a person. So I'm at a stalemate there also. So there are gains and there are wounds.
What about feminism?
I should let my husband testify. I am a feminist and believe strongly in the realization of my own female identity. I think that it can work creatively between men and women. But I would say I'm a feminist, yes. I don't know whether I would say I'm a feminist right on. But that is one of the most important parts of my life that I try and deal with every single day. I started a women's group up in the Berkeley area, and I am writing for the Commission on the Status of Women, women newspaper up in San Francisco. Most of my NBC radio programs that I produce and moderate deal with women's issues.
I'd just like to identify myself. My name is Andrew Ritzinger, and I was a member of the Unification Church for a year and a half. And after I'd been in the church 4 months, I was kidnapped by the aid of the San Francisco Police Department, handcuffed and thrown in the back of a police car and taken to prison, and then later went through the programming experience. Then I escaped from that and returned to the church and remained in it for 11 months after that. And then I left the church of my own free will. And I came to this play with hope of objectivity, because what I'd like to say, is that I was in the church, went through the same centers, went through the same programming, if you want to call it that Barbara did, but I did not feel that I was brainwashed. I never felt that my mind was controlled. I never felt that I was being thought for by other people. And when I independently reached the decision that it was time for me to leave the church, and I did so on my own free will. And I think that the real central issue here is the freedom of religion that is guaranteed us by the First Amendment. Do people really have the right to practice religion if they choose, no matter how badly it is thought of? And frankly, Mooney has become, a scare word, and so is cult. It could be the name of a horror movie, because it just become, so emotionally charged now, that to be a Mooney is like being a nigger, It's like a terrible, terrible thing, And when we talk about Reverend Moon and about wealth and Mercedes and things, we've got to realize that all spiritual groups that have a guru or a great teacher oftentimes treat him with great respect and buy him Mercedes. Any master or any leader of any group that you can think of You know, this is often the case, you know, including Billy Graham or any other accepted, you know, evangelist. So what I think is really the central issue here is, can people, who is to make the decision for you that you are allowed to practice your own religion? I mean, at what point can people take that away from you? You know? And so would you like to address that?
Sure, I'd like to respond to that because I think you raise a number of very, very complicated and very important points, and I think I'm really glad that you're here to express that viewpoint.